Good afternoon, everybody. It is Friday, which means we're honing into the weekend now. It's the 5th of March. We're into March already, and welcome to Lessons in Leadership. I'm Mary Gregory, and it's my absolute delight to welcome today my guest, Craig McMurrough. Hello, Craig.
Hello, Mary. How are you?
I'm very well and very good to see you here. Now, Craig and I know each other from quite some time ago. We both walked the corridors of Tesco way back. That's how we met. And I know that since we've both moved on from that organisation, that you particularly have gone and worked in some tremendous organisations, really big ones, KPMG amongst them, IBM. And you've had a career that really has been highlighted by navigating sort of the senior echelons of these big corporate organisations. I'm sure you've got lots of things to share around how you managed to do that and what you learned around the different cultures and the different ways of things are done in those big businesses. So I'm going to kick off and just ask you a bit about, what got you to choose to go into that sort of big corporate world? What was it that took you into that being your career?
Thank you, Mary. Great to be with you. I guess my journey, started in retail, and I joined the Sainsbury's organisation, obviously a competitor of Tesco, way back in the early 90s. I say way back, feels like a long time ago now, as a graduate trainee, and I was within the retail sector. Part of the organisation. So in stores, learning the fundamentals of management, leadership, operations, all that commercial element. And I guess I got the flavour of what it felt to work within a large corporate organisation, albeit that I was at that point early days moving from store to store across the Midlands, as it turned out in that context. So one side, well, I'd worked for 13 years for Sainsbury's, and I'd completed an MBA. So studying about global organisations and how strategy was formed and the whole aspect of change management, which was a core part of that MBA, really did trigger a question for me of whether I could make it as a consultant. So I figured after 13 years and an MBA under my belt, let's test one's mettle and see if I can join a consultancy and go and talk to others and advise, hopefully, organizations to how to manage change successfully and lead large change programs. And that's what I did. That's what I did. And you mentioned I went into IBM, so I joined there and had a really enlightening and interesting experience for sure.
Yes, incredible. So, and what are some of the themes that you've picked up? I mean, because I know that working in such big organizations, it can be very easy to lose our identity as part of being that organization because the culture can be very strong. How did you manage that? How did you navigate that element of being a part of this big organization, but still holding on to yourself?
And I think it was discovery, actually. And when I joined Sainsbury's, I was in my early 20s, so I hadn't probably fully appreciated and was even aware of my own purpose, my value system, if you like. And of course, I was working with teams around corporate culture and understanding various cultural models. So it was beginning to have a reflection period of, well, what were my own values and what did I feel was important around integrity and transparency, etc. So I was always struck with, in some organizations where what I saw around me was perhaps jarring with my own value system, and then acknowledging how uncomfortable that sometimes made me feel. And on the opposite, though, of course, working environments where the values were absolutely in line with my own personal set, and actually those were the environments I really thrived. No surprise, of course. So I think for me the trick was to learn to be yourself, your natural self. And many people talk about bringing your authentic self to work now, but I learned actually that you can waste a lot of energy trying to fit within a mold of an organization, and it may not be you, your natural style. So really think about your own style and where that's going to fit. And from a leadership perspective, others will be happy to follow, or will be
Yes.
want to follow, be motivated to follow your particular style.
Yes, yes. Okay. And when you talk about the different organizations you've worked for, is there an organization that stands out for you that really did it well from your perspective? Because I know that one of your passions is actually the people focus of change. You're change director now at Capita, and it's all about the people, making sure that they're on board and come with you. But prior to even your role at Capita, have you an experience of an organization that did it really, really well?
I'd say that there are a number of places. I think it's more about the leader often. I mean, I can think of, and I'm still in contact with many of the great leaders that I've worked for in the
Yes.
past, who recognize something within you that others perhaps don't, or give you an opportunity that you may not have had previously.
Yeah.
And you know that actually you're going to move heaven and earth to, you build that psychological contract, of course, and then you will
Yes.
go that extra mile, do those extra hours, really put the hard work in, because that relationship is strong.
Yes.
So I mean, my days in retail were great. I liked, the Sainsbury's and the Tesco's of this world. I think IBM as well was a very positive experience. And
Yes.
I've contracted around a number of organisations as well, and I've seen some great role models of leaders. So I've rather than cite perhaps one organisation, I think there's something about the individuals that work within a great function, and where their values are particularly aligned to the organization values, and then of course
Yes.
they just inspire and motivate you to do a great job.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying there aligns very much with research around what research has found, that actually people join organizations because they love the organization, but they often leave because of their managers and their leaders, because of the way they're treated. And similarly, they will stay because of their managers and leaders and the way that they're treated and the experiences they
Yeah,
have on a day-to-day
yeah,
basis.
yeah.
From
We
your
have
yeah,
sorry, I was just going to say, within the Capita business, we have some extraordinary strong leadership,
yes,
some really authentic leadership um, attributes, which certainly through a period of change, and we know we've all been through a hell of a year of change and uncertainty,
yes,
and demonstrating that level of honesty and openness, transparency, where you really believe, and albeit that you're not in the room with these folks when they give you a message, but there's um, the honesty kind of transcends through the the ether, if you will, or via the Zoom call
yes,
or Teams call. That's a real strength, and folks having
yes,
and leaders having humility to call it out when perhaps they don't get it right. Clearly, a
right,
leader needs to, for me, have a courage of their convictions, and make a decision and call it in the way that they want to call it or feel it's right. But
yes,
actually listening to the team or the audience, if you will, and being able to adjust and modify when it's quite clear that there's a level of strength or of feeling that it may not have
yes,
been the right decision. I think that takes a lot of bravery to do that.
yes.
But it really does, for me, command quite a lot of respect as well.
Yes. So I'm really hearing there the power and the impact of the leader is around, being transparent, being honest and open. And even when they may have taken the wrong decision or gone in down a wrong direction, being having the guts enough to own up to that and be
Yeah,
vulnerable.
and and,
Now
and
I
when a
know,
le- and when a
yeah,
leader, sorry, Mary, I'm just going to add to that a little bit, if I may. And when a
yeah,
leader can really describe and articulate their own sense of purpose, and if you like, what they stand for, and
yeah,
how that then either supports or indeed sometimes can contradict let's say a corporate decision. I
yes,
think that's very powerful, because that's a leader that is prepared to stand up for what they believe in, and is
yes,
not just a yes person to nod to the corporate decisions that sometimes don't always reflect what's going on in the business itself. So I think those are additional good attributes.
absolutely. And all of those attributes do take a tremendous amount of courage, actually.
Mhm.
So that you have to be brave to be a leader. It's not necessarily for the faint-hearted.
Indeed,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it can be lonely. It can be
yeah,
lonely.
Yeah, so there's something there about how do you counteract? How do you make sure it's not lonely? Because I know from my perspective as a coach, I often end up coaching very senior leaders who feel they can't get any counsel anywhere else in the organization. There's nowhere else to go but to talk to someone who's outside of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
How how do leaders get that the support they need, do you think, apart from employing a coach, for example?
Well, I think there's something about, and again, it's a term that was fashioned a couple of years ago. Sort of self-directed teams, or indeed peer peer appraisal, peer coaching. Building your own network within the business, or indeed externally,
Yes,
where you can have a safe place to discuss. I mean, I joined a number of external networks that
yes,
some are professionally orientated around change management, as an example, and others are less focused on the profession, but it's about an opportunity to discuss challenges that we face as leaders, and I think just that having that strong dialogue with other colleagues
yes.
in and outside the organisation is a real good safety valve.
Yes, the power of peer support and networks that way really come into their own then as well, don't they? I was curious also about you mentioned, a leader who's prepared to own up to the error of their ways if they've gone down the wrong channel or whatever. Do you have an example? It might not be your own, it might be someone else you've observed where a leader has actually owned it. Because I think this is a really hard thing for some leaders to get, is that you need to be vulnerable and you need to open up and be honest with
Yeah,
people.
and
So
that
have you
for
got an example where a leader did that really well?
yeah, most recently we've been looking at things like performance management, and debating uh, the the merits of various approaches. And in a recent situation, uh, a particular leader felt one approach was how we should approach things, or move forward, and that was positioned, but the team didn't actually endorse it at all. So there was a
Right.
little bit of pushback initially, and some quite strong challenge, and the leader in uh, in their wisdom decided that actually we should listen to the challenge, and then make some suggestions, do a bit of benchmarking, and
Yes.
see what else is going on in other organizations, and then make some recommendations.
Yes.
So I think with the best intent, said leader was looking to move direction. Um, Actually then hearing the feedback and responding to the level of, in some cases, challenge, or indeed that feedback, giving the group the opportunity to shape the future in a collaborative way, I think was a really
Yes.
positive move.
Yes. Yes. And what was the impact of that
Well,
you
well,
observed?
I, I definitely have observed a more commitment to the, and we haven't decided yet on the options. We're putting options on the table, but in terms of engagement, and trust, that does a hell of a lot to encourage and foster better
Yes.
working relations, particularly when, again, as an example, and I think this whole period for me in terms of lockdown and the pandemic has meant we can't thrash out an issue around a table in a room. It's all done virtually, and I do think that has an impact on decisions that are made you know from on high, or from central functions,
Yes.
and then
Yes.
they are disseminated, and it's challenging sometimes to always convey the rationale, and reasoning behind certain decisions. So by involving, no surprise, the end customer, if you will, the end user in some of that shaping, then
Yes.
um, I'm sure we get a better return on and commitment.
Such and yeah, and it's just remarkable to hear that, because it's like what I'm hearing coming through that is people will be much more engaged, and what that leader did was really listened well.
Hmm.
And you mentioned earlier on that one of the key qualities is to be a great listener. What I kind of have it that listening is one of the fundamental skills of being effective as a leader, and yet it's one that we continually, including myself, have to keep developing in ourselves. I wonder what your thoughts are around why is it so hard for us to learn to listen?
Um, I think from a leadership perspective, we often feel there's a responsibility on us to have the answers,
Yes.
and to kind of always have the solution, or to lead the team in a direction.
Yes.
Um, so tuning into how people are, this conversation, for example, and tuning into our direction of flow and being responsive in the moment, I think is really important, and being prepared to get into that vulnerable place, if you like,
Yes.
to
Yes.
to be somewhat exposed that you may not have the answer, but and that's okay.
Yeah.
um to recognize that there are others around you that may have a better idea or solution, and
Yes.
to go with that. so
Yes.
so so I think, and we talk about mindfulness a great deal nowadays, but just being in the moment, of the conversation, the dialogue, listening to the words, listening to or observing the mannerisms is so important. The non-verbal cues, if you will, of communication.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that absolutely resonates with me in terms of leaders are often developed and recruited because of their brain power and their capacity and their capability to do a good job and know the answers and all that sort of stuff. And yet it's hard to let go and say, actually, let the others find the answers. You as the leader don't need to find all the answers. And I know I run quite a few leader as coach programs. And the basic thing is to help those leaders not provide the answers, to actually just be able to ask really good
Yeah,
questions
yeah,
that they
and
then listen to.
and not just because it's in the behind you in your background, but that wonderful word of ego, and that
Yes.
book you've written, I think is just so important to let go of your ego,
Yeah.
in dialogue with colleagues,
Yes.
with peers,
Yes.
challenging as it is.
Yes.
Just have a thought about where your triggers are, and where you can get more from people, uh, if it's a sort of truly kind of partnership and collaborative way of doing things.
Really got to open up to people, haven't you? I mean, I think it's like now absolutely highly recognized that the only way through such uncertain times, such volatile times, which are only going to continue, is to work collaboratively. And it's impossible to work collaboratively if you're stuck in your ego all the time. So absolutely got to learn how to navigate that. So we're going to move on a bit to you, Craig, because
Hmm.
I'm so impressed with all the things that you've done and the different roles that you've had, leading change within some quite demanding cultures and organizations. I'd just like to find out a bit more about a key lesson that you've learned along the way that was almost a turning point moment for
Yeah.
you, really got you to sit back and think, oh, this is what it's all about, and still affects you today. It still shows up in how you lead
Mm.
today.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been fortunate, that, and I said this before. A number of people have recognized something in me that has allowed me to take an opportunity to work for some of these great
Yes.
organizations. And
Yes.
I'm always very grateful to those people. And, those for me are some of my, strong leadership role models.
Yeah.
I think when I became a consultant, bearing in mind I'd worked for one organization for 13 years, and I took a risk to join a consultancy, a global organization, and
Yeah.
I hadn't really considered enough, perhaps joining the organization, on what a consultancy business, not a consultancy business, what a consultant looked like in terms of day-to-day activities and how they went about their business, so to speak. So I spent a lot of time, probably too much time initially, worrying about the metaphorical suit that a colleague from IBM needed to wear as they pitched up to a client, and found that I was spending too much energy in thinking about how I needed to be rather than being, with the
Mm.
clients. And so the lesson learned was, once I'd um, felt, or learned to just be myself in the client situations, the relationships changed with my clients and with my team members,
Okay. Yeah.
and I got better results. There was a better level of engagement, and that was my true self. And I really feel that, uh, you know where people thrive is in organizations, from a corporate perspective, if you like, that they can be their true self. They can
Yes.
just be who they are. They bring their true self to work on a daily basis, and that gives them the space to be their natural self. So I
Yes.
think for me that lesson was worry less about the suit, and think about the kind of power of the conversation and dialogue, and naturally what you bring to that conversation.
So ditch the suit, ditch the image a bit. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, image is important, and clearly, one needs to be, present oneself well, if you will. But I think that I was trying to consider the mold, the IBM
Yeah.
mold, and
Yeah.
actually we're all different. So
Yes.
think about what differentiates you, and the qualities that you can bring to that situation that the person next to you may not. So
Yes.
it's not cookie cutter. It's the individual, really. I suppose that's
Yes. And
that
there's
I'm
something there
considering.
about being okay with who you are and the fact that you might be strong in that area, but not strong in another, and someone else is going to be different to you. I
And
suppose.
I'd like to think,
Yeah.
sorry, that actually since then, the fact that I do bring different qualities and viewpoints into the situation has served me well in some of the other
Yes.
organizations I've worked for thereafter.
Yes. So this might sound like a bit of a weird question, but what I'm interested in is what you're talking about is a bit like the mask that we put on.
Mm.
When we go into, I can remember myself as a much younger leader in an organization thinking I was doing the right thing, and actually I was probably wearing a very good mask because I wasn't really being myself. So my question is around, how did you become aware of the mask and actually that you weren't really being you? How did you recognize that?
I was just exhausted. I was exhausted
Oh,
after the first 3 months on a project. I wondered, well, why is this so challenging? And I was worrying about this and that and the other, and it just became almost consuming, that
yes.
I was obsessing around what I thought, how I needed to be, rather than
Yes.
actually just being me and allowing the results to, if you like, speak for themselves.
Yes.
And it became apparent, just having a chat with some of the team that I was working in, socially, and there was a real difference within how I came across socially versus within the context of the program.
Yes.
So there was a conversation that ensued around, well, you just need to be a bit more, there's a balance between how you are socially and then how you are within the corporate context.
Right.
So
Right.
be more of who you are socially, if you will, within
Within the context of when you,
the project
yeah.
context.
And how did you bring that bit in then? Did it,
I
because
I
to me it's
I
like when
lost
we started, it's like we
I
create
lost the
habits for
suit.
ourselves.
I lost the suit. So you've got to consciously think about,
Yeah.
um, and I was consciously thinking of the suit. So I dropped the conscious thinking, and so the
Yes.
subconscious kicked in, and then I was just who I am. I mean,
Right.
the work didn't suffer. In fact, if anything, the rapport I could establish with the colleagues and the senior leaders of said clients in this case just improved, and even strengthened.
Yes. And I'm really getting there because I talk a lot about, as a leader, we've got to be conscious and we've got to act consciously of ourselves. But what I'm hearing there is you let go of self-consciousness in order to be more authentic and allow that part of yourself, your authentic self, to come through, that sociable, this is Craig, this is who I am,
Yeah, absolutely, and
leader come through.
bringing that energy, and in some cases humor, which which does break ice, does help build those relationships.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. People want to get to know you and want to work with you, not a pretense of who you are, or
Yes,
a
indeed.
robot, or a
Yeah,
mold of who
quite.
you are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. That's really helpful. I think that what you've shared there will resonate with a lot of people. And I know I work with leaders a lot, and it's about how can they be themselves within the context of the organization that they are. I think it's something a lot of us struggle with. So, I ask this to every guest that we have on this show, and we are coming to the end of our time. So, we've been going through this extraordinary year. It's continuing on. I know we've got an end in sight in terms of we've got a plan, but it's still going to be a lot of uncertainty as we go through this period. I'd just like to ask you for any words of advice or anything you'd like to pass on to people that are watching now or will be watching later, in regards to how can you manage yourself? How can you keep yourself going as a leader during these uncertain times?
So for me, there's a couple of things. Have an interest, a hobby that is, completely out of work that you can just get lost in, whether it's gardening or, I've taken a percussion, for example, during lockdown, which and my dining room is now full of bongos and congas and all sorts of weird and wonderful instruments.
You make some lovely noises.
Oh yes, the neighbours love it. And my point is, it's escaping to something that is just completely different from what I do on a day-to-day basis. So having that particular interest, I think there's definitely something about aware of your own well-being, mental health. I've also done some mental health training, the Mental Health First Aid England training during this lockdown period, which has been a real eye-opener and hopefully a helpful sort of signposting for me and others when we recognise that people may still be struggling in isolation or not feeling part of the team, etc. So I would encourage leaders to really consider the well-being of their people, and perhaps these courses are available online. They're not expensive, so go through something that is going to educate you in signs to look for when folks are feeling anxious, and because the manifestations are there, and we just need to be attuned, I think, to people, certainly keeping people motivated throughout this period and for what we go through next in terms of the next cycle of this period of change. How can you best keep your colleagues focused? How well do you know the team? This has been a great opportunity to have conversations that you may not have during a kind of normal working pattern. Getting into knowing that team really well, checking in with them on a regular basis. I don't mean once a month. This is a conversation that should be happening on a couple of days basis.
Great. I mean, that's really good advice, actually, particularly as mental health is so much more, it's top of mind now, much more than it used to be. And of course, working virtually, some of the challenges leaders face around keeping teams together and trying to maintain that cohesiveness, absolutely talking to people every other day is going to increase that, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Craig, it has been an absolute delight to talk with you today. But every time I interview a guest, I never know where the time goes, but we are running out of time. So I'm going to thank you so much. And maybe we'll bring you back another time to speak another time. It'd be lovely to hear more about some of the work you're doing for charities as well, I think.
That's been really helpful for my own well-being, actually, contributing to supporting other charities. So I'd be very happy to.
That'd be lovely. Thank you. So thank you everyone for watching today, or watching in catch up. Next week is episode 20. Can you believe it? Already we're up to episode 20 and we are talking to Nick Sanderson, who is the CEO of Audley Homes. So very much looking forward to talking to Nick and his experience of leading an organisation that is caring for a vulnerable group through this pandemic. So do join us then, 12 noon every Friday. See you soon. Bye for now.